We're going to start off, first of all, talking about some mindset, because I think one of the things that's really important when we look at real estate and at business as a whole, really, is the mindset, making sure we have the right mindset from the very beginning. Because I think sometimes what we can do is when we start pursuing something, we don't realize that there's this bigger thing that we could be pursuing as we follow a smaller goal. In Keller Williams, as you're new to Keller Williams, one of the great things in Keller Williams is this course called Ignite. I don't know if you've taken Ignite yet. Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? It's one of my favorite ones is the Big Why, which is where you talk about, you've got to really know what's driving you, because if you don't know what's going to drive you, you're going to run into all these walls, these issues. When we talk about real estate, the issues that we run into when it comes to real estate are things like, tenants not paying their bills, or that furnace that just went on the clink, like the day you bought the house, or, for us, we bought a duplex and, we made this beautiful basement apartment and then the wall sprung a leak, right? And when I say sprung a leak, like literally it was a hose coming out of the wall. It was incredible. I've never seen anything like that. And so you're going to run into all these obstacles and you're like, okay, I know, I'm done. But if you pursue that bigger why, that bigger goal, that's going to allow you to get past some of those issues. And so that's where we're going to kind of start here. Now, the connection that we have here with Grant Cardone is a guy who's down in the States. He's, a lot of people find him offensive. A lot of people find him amazing, but his big thing is, I don't care, just as long as a lot of people find me, right? His whole thing is, I want attention. And because he knows after attention comes money. And so that's a really important thing for him. It's promote, big thing for him. What I really like about him is twofold. Is number one, he's got a system for success. And number two is he lives the system that he tells you, right? And I think that's extremely important, because a lot of people out there, when they say, oh, you should do this, then they go and do this. I remember there was I went to meet up with this financial planner once as a mortgage broker. I own a mortgage broker, which we'll talk about that in a minute. But and he asked me, and I said, hey, let's talk a little bit about your clients. And some of your clients are going to invest in real estate, and I know you want a balanced portfolio. So you got your index funds, you got your this, you got this, and then go into real estate. He said, we can talk about mortgages. He goes, well, I'm not a really big believer of leverage. And so we don't want people leveraging their principal residence to buy real estate. That's bad. And he says, that's what our franchise tells us we can't say. And I said, oh, okay. And then we get the meeting done and we're walking the door and he's like, hey, can we just get together? Because I want to take a mortgage out of my house to go buy real estate. I'm like, okay. And it turns out it's just because the franchise itself says don't do that. That's their ruling, right? And so he has to subscribe to that in the way that to be part of that franchise. But then personally, he doesn't believe that, right? And that's one of the things that this book right here, which is the Sell or Be Sold book. And I think has anybody read this book? No? Read it. This is especially for in real estate. I think in anything, if you're running a business, if you're married, if you have kids, if you have friends, if you exist on the planet Earth, I think this is a really good book. And the reason why I think it says sell or be sold. And everybody looks at it and they go, oh, it's like a sales book, right? That's Zig Ziglar or, whatever, book is out there. But the whole concept is that for you to promote something, you need to be committed to it. Because otherwise somebody else is going to sell you on what they're committed to. Right. So for example, if he says, if I say, hey, let's go out for sushi. And then he's like, I just want to go out for steak. And we're like, well, I guess we're going to go for steak. Well, he was more committed than I was. I got sold. He was selling. You see what happened there? I'll go for both, by the way. You can take me for sushi or steak. I'm good either way. Right. So I'm getting hungry. Just kidding. No, you know what? I went to what is it called? The Aussie Burger place on at Vaughan Mills. Have you been to that little mall there? When you're heading south into the city, stop. This is a little, thing for that little mall there where the Vaughan Mills Mall is. You guys know what I'm talking about. Just a little bit north of it, there's all these little plazas right there. And they all have unbelievable, there's amazing bubble tea. There's this Toro sushi place that's unreal. It's unstoppable. The packaging is the sexiest packaging I've ever seen for sushi. It's ridiculous. You get it and it's you don't want to eat it because it's a work of art, right? It looks so good. And it's takeout. And you're like, this is nuts. So I had an Aussie burger there. So I'm good. That was the whole long story of that one. Yeah, write that down. Aussie burger. Aussie burger. Because you can't.
USSR.
OZZIE.
Oh,
Aussie. But it is an Aussie because you have to get, if you want the true Aussie burger, you need the egg on the burger. So, right. So at least that's what my wife tells me. So I haven't been to Australia. She was there. Yeah. So come on, hey David. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah.
Good. So without further ado, what I want to do is I want to kind of get started and kind of talk about some of the concepts here. And we have a booklet there. So if you want to take your booklets there, and I will be flipping a booklet the second that Guy gets here. I'm going to be flipping a booklet to everybody online so that we can have it for you guys as well. I'm going to give you the filled out booklet as well, so you have that, because I know it'll be very difficult for you guys to take that. So if that's okay for you guys, we'll be getting that to you. Give me a thumbs up if we're good for getting the booklet in a little bit. Thumbs up. Beautiful. Okay, so the big thing about the whole concept about getting rich. Now, the one thing about rich, I want to kind of talk a little bit about that, because it's sometimes, especially in Canada, because we're all so conservative and quiet. When you go to the States, it's totally different. Has everybody been to the States? We know what it's like when you cross the border, it feels different, right?
Yeah.
You know, like for me, like I feel like when I go across the border, I'm like 10x turns into like 100x. Like I'm just like, there's so much money here, right? Like it's just crazy. Like everything. And when you go to Keller Williams, for example, in the States, you're like, yeah, I'm doing my 100 units or whatever here. And they're like, I'm doing 1,200 units. And you're like, what? It's crazy, right? So everything's just so much bigger down there. But one thing that they very, very have a lot of bravado about is money. And the one thing in Canada that we have a lot of non-bravado about is money. We don't talk about it enough, right? We don't talk about that getting wealthy is a positive thing. You know, we kind of say like being conservative and not talking about money. You never want to say, yeah, how much do you make? How much do you make? Like, that's weird, right? But you go to like an event, you know, like say a Grant Cardone 10X events, like it's a growth con. They'll be like, hey, how much you make? Oh, we're doing 10 million. How much you make? 15 million. How much you make? 500,000. How much you make? I haven't even started yet. And everybody's comfortable in the room having that kind of an open dialogue. It's a beautiful thing. And I think that's what, if you surround yourself with people, you can have that open dialogue around that. You can then start talking about how to build to be successful, right? Because the last thing you want to do is like try to be successful in a little bucket in the corner by yourself. It's just not going to work. Because again, just like myself, you probably don't know everything, right? So learning from other people, I think, is critical. And that open dialogue is really critical. Now, the idea that, you know, being wealthy or being rich, whatever word you want to use that's comfortable for you, is unattainable, I think that's a myth, right? And I think it's definitely a myth because I want to talk about my experience, right? So back in 2005, I first started off as an entrepreneur. I started a construction business. And that construction business, you know, we did HVAC. We did HVAC for some of the largest houses in Canada. So when I talk about the largest houses in Canada, the largest house we did was 55,000 square feet. Like, so put that in perspective, like that's probably bigger than this plaza that we're in right now, right? So not as big as the virtual space everybody's in, because that's infinite, but it's definitely bigger than the plaza that we're in, huge. And so it was really exciting project. So we grew that up to about 20 employees. We were doing massive work. And then 2012, in 2012, we had a really shocking year. That year we had manufacturer defects. We had problems with labor. We had problems with clients not paying. You know, there was a lot of issues that happened. I burned through all of my savings and I walked away with about $750,000 in the hole. It was a very, very difficult time. Now, when you look at that and you're like, why is he telling me all this? Like, this is horrible. But what I'm saying is at that point, I had to make a decision, right? I could make the decision saying, I'm done. I'm, you know, this whole like self-employed thing, I'm finished with it. Or what I can do is I can say, I'm going to double down on it and I'm going to really go for the gusto. And that's exactly what I did. Now, luckily, I found a mentor. And I think mentor is extremely key. And for me, like a relatable mentor, I think is important because I had a relatable mentor who just so happened to be my landlord. And for my corporate, like I owned a house, but this was for my business. What I had about 4,000 square foot shop at the time. And what she said to me, she said, like, why don't you like get into real estate or something? I'm like, no, man, like real estate agents are scumballs. Like, I'm not going to get into real estate. No way. And she's like, Steve, I'm a real estate agent. And I'm like, okay, I get it, Michelle. But, and then she said, well, then you don't have to be a scumball either, right? You don't think I am? No, you don't have to be one either. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it for a little bit of time, right? And so then I got my real estate license. And in my first year of real estate, I sold 43 houses in my first year of real estate. For real estate agents, you know, listening and that sort of thing, you know, it's a pretty decent number, I would say, for a first year. But the thing is why I did it was more important than what I did. because I was so motivated. We had 2 kids, or well, 1 kid, second one just being born at that time. And I had nothing but this as my option to solve the problems. And the other thing that I did is we started also buying real estate. Now you're probably thinking, how could a guy $750,000 in the hole be buying real estate? Like I had CRA locking down my bank account. I had WSIB all breathing down my shoulders. I had all of that stuff. Well, translate to now, I'm a mortgage broker, so I can find a way. So it's extremely important. Where there's a will, there's a way. And I think that's what's really important is that, when you have that big drive, that big why, and you can build with that as your foundation, everything becomes possible. And the idea that getting rich, is that whole idea that somebody just got it from their parents or somebody got it because they were lucky, they whatever it was, it's not true. A lot of people who can get to being horribly wealthy, and I say horribly in the most positive way, but getting to extremely wealthy, you can get through that through hard work, through determination. You can get that through grit. You can get that through, surrounding yourself with the right people. So I think it's extremely important to be able to put that. And we've got the coffee. Oh, and so that's where I kind of want to talk about that. Let's see if we can do this. Oh, there we go. And then, so this is a concept just saying like, you got to know how to get it, then you got to know how to keep it, then you got to know how to multiply it. And do it in that order. That's how you can, on my shirt, it says the 10X. This is how we can create that 10X growth. Because first of all, you first have to get the money. This is where we talk about income and how important income is. Like if somebody's working at Tim Hortons, no offense to Tim Hortons, but if somebody's working at Tim Hortons and that's their only line of income, then their problem isn't buying a rental property. Their problem is they got to grow their income, right? They need more income coming in the door. Because if they buy that rental property and they have no fallback plan for income, they're going to be like me in that situation of desperation with them. You don't want to go there. Right? You want to go into something with a position of strength. That strength can either come through money,
Why
come
can't I
through
get the crank
experience,
open?
come through anything like that, come through the friends that you have, your investors that you have, any of those things. But you definitely want to have first get. The second thing, he's got to be able to keep it. Right? So keeping the money becomes extremely important. One of the things that he talks about, I'm going to skip through a couple of things because I know we're going, I want to go quickly so we can get also into some of the real estate as soon as possible because I know Brian's jonesing to get into the real estate and I'm excited to give it to him. And so, but, the idea of keeping it is, Grant talks about running your business or your house on 40% of your income, right? So that doesn't sound like a get rich quick guy. So when we think of Grant Cardone, everybody thinks of the money gun. Does anybody know who Grant Cardone is? Yeah, the money gun. I drive the jet. I'm in the jet. I'm the big rich guy, right? Like,
is that crop money?
No, I don't need the little ladder. I've got.
I don't really know.
I think it's got to be real. I mean, you can't fly a jet, own a jet. I'm a jet
I
guy.
tried to buy
I don't need it.
money.
Yeah,
I think
That's amazing. So
they give me $4,000 back. I didn't know. They said it would work.
Yeah, that's right. Fake money is expensive money. It's true. Yeah. But yeah, so with Grant, you look at it and you see he's not talking about a get rich quick scheme. He's not talking about anything that is shiny object theory. He's more talking about here's what you need to do to be committed to your goals, and here's how you do massive action to get it done. Okay, and then the multiply, it means that once you, just black is amazing. And so the multiply factor is the investment. Because if you can live off of 40%, there's a certain portion that has to go to the government, as we all know. And then the other portion that you can invest and put into real estate. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So, when we look at this, the idea that, hello, how are you? Welcome. When we look at stats, a lot of Canadians, and we can look at all of our friends who, when we look at a lot of our friends and family and that sort of thing, they're stuck in this situation of living paycheck to paycheck. They've been sold a barrel of goods, right? If we look at what the schools teach us, if we look at what the universities teach us, they tell us, go out, get a job, buy a house, pay it off, and live on whatever pension that you can live on.
What do you mean there's
right?
no one?
The challenge with that is, if any big thing happens, like say the government prints trillions of dollars, for example, I don't know if that would ever happen, but let's just pretend it does. If that should happen, what will that do to those pensions? What does that do to that setup for that individual? Like the guy who I ended up picking up the mic that we're not using right now, from Long and McQuaid, the guy who worked there, he's like, oh, you're a mortgage broker. I'm really trying to get into a house. And I said, okay, how much do you have saved? He's like, well, I don't really have that much saved. Both my wife and I, we work retail because I've been working at Long and McQuaid for 20 years. He says, the house that we're living in right now, we're going to have to be moving out because the landlord is selling the house because we can't pay him enough rent to be able to make it make sense for him to keep the property. He's been at his job for 20 years, right? That's almost more sad than me being $750,000 in the hole, right? That's a tougher situation. Because for him, he has to adapt to a world that he's never understood. I was taking risks. I was playing with fire. I got burned. He didn't even know the fire exists, right? Because he subscribed to the policy of, I'm going to work hard. I'm going to work for an institutionalized company. I'm going to be there for 20 years. And now he can't afford where he wants to live. He can't afford it. The maximum he can pay in rent right now is $2,000 a month, him and his spouse.
Yeah.
20 years on the job, right? That's not the life we want, and that's not the life we want for the people around us, right? So again, the idea that you can save your way to wealth, I totally disagree with that. I think you have to increase your income, right? And we'll talk a little bit about different ways to increase the income, because if you look at it and you say like $700 a year, what's that going to do? That's like what, for us, that's 2 weeks of groceries right now. Like I was saying to somebody, we were talking about like a lemon is 75 cents for a single lemon. Like it used to be, you get 4 for $1. Remember that? Like that was like a year ago, right? Like 4 for $1, 75 cents. And they say real estate is going up. Like the lemon people, they're crushing it. So if you want to make extra money, grow a lemon tree. And no, I'm just.
Find a lemon tree, really.
Exactly. Well, we grew one in our house, but it didn't go so well. Yeah.
You want to be in a position where you can sit there and see how much.
That's right. That's right.
You need 11 big thing.
Well, and that's a huge thing, because when we look at it, we say like, we always get our advice from the generation prior. We get our advice from the people around us and that sort of thing. It's like, a penny saved is a penny earned, right? And so is that really the way that's going to get us to wealth? Well, we've already looked at that, and that's certainly not the case. Yeah, if you want to monitor the chat, Guy. Guy's here monitoring the chat, guys. So everybody say hi to Guy. Say hi, Guy, in the chat and everything. I'm going to bring him like this. Oh, I can't. Oh, come on over here. Yeah, so here's Guy. I'm just going to bring in, we're going to do a little introduction for Guy. Guy went out and got us coffee here. So he would have brought you guys coffee too online, but I didn't know how to do that. We will get you coffee online. I promise you that.
And talk about being prompt. You started before 7. I know I was back before 7.
I was getting things going because I think online we were supposed to start at 6:30.
Oh,
So that's where we met things up.
doors open.
I know, that's so true.
Hey,
So
Steve,
when we
can
look
you
at
hear
it,
me?
where do you get your advice from? If we get it from the family who said it's always more about savings, it's because they learned from the generation prior, and that generation learned from the generation prior. And if you want to get the same results, keep on doing the same action. Now, if the generation prior was able to create generational wealth, you might have had a different perspective. Yeah, exactly. Like, exactly. If you're, has anybody read Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad? Put your hands up. Right? I think it's one of the best books ever. Yeah. Best books. I love this book. Don't get me wrong. This book is top 10, top 5, probably top 3. Robert Kiyosaki is in the top 5, easily in the top 5. Simon Sinek is probably in my top 5. Start with Why. I don't know if you guys read that one. A brilliant book. But what Robert Kiyosaki talks about with Rich Dad Poor Dad is he talks about he's got his rich dad, which is that self-employed whack job, who always has these random people showing up the house and they're doing all those random things and just like mover and shaker. And then his poor dad is the professor at the university, who worked a stable job throughout his year, didn't invest, was very conservative about things, and then didn't give the skill set for him to be able to get to where he needed to get to create that growth, right? So we have to look at who we listen to, right? For me, I listen to Grant Cardone. Guy's got billions of dollars. I think he knows what he's talking about. I listened to Gary Keller at Keller Williams because he knows what he's talking about, right? For me, if you want to talk about how you make $1 million in a year, I can tell you that because we've done that, right? So I can talk about growth, and I can talk about how do you buy 5 properties. I can talk about that personally. I can talk about how do you build it, no problem. Can I talk about making $1 billion? No. That's why I use Grant's content to build from. And then, yeah, right to there. Never take advice from a quitter or a pretender. It goes right into that as well. So financial freedom, this is a really big part. And this is why we wanted to start with this as part of our presentation, because it was really important, I think, for us to kind of say, it's 1 part execution, but 2 parts mental, right? The 2 parts mental is we have to forget what we knew, so we can learn what we're going to know, right? Now, if there's something that's a good habit that you've built from the past, keep it, retain it, and share it, right? Because this isn't a tear down strategy. This is a build strategy. And like a renovation, there's parts of the house you want to keep. It's like a mentality. It's the same thing. We want to keep the parts that are going to work, and we want to abandon the parts that are not going to work, right? And the other thing too is we want to get on the offense. In other words, we want to get onto the ability to be able to start grabbing the things that are out there and moving forward, rather than holding on the things that have been handcuffing us in the past, right? And again, that's a mindset thing. Sometimes it's a spouse thing. You're looking at a spouse and you're dealing with a spouse who might not be on the same page as you, right? I was that with my wife when we were buying our first investment property. She's probably listening to this and laughing right now.
Is her name Emily?
Her name is Emily.
Oh, she's on here.
Oh, so when we bought our first investment property, I was like, real estate's for old people, right? And this was back before we really started realizing the value of real estate, right? But we had to abandon that mindset. She had to chisel it out of my head. And then finally we could see the big merits of what it did for, we bought that one house for like, I think 115,000, and now it's worth like 800. Now that's not an overnight thing. That's over since 2005.
Yep.
Yes.
But
I can't see it. Yeah.
Perfect. There we go. Oh, was she music playing or something?
Something like that.
Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
You're driving.
Right. And the other thing too is when we look at this, like the idea is that it doesn't matter whether we're female, male, however we want to identify, and all of those things. I don't want to get into that discussion. That's a hotbed of mess I don't want to touch, in a conversation. So it doesn't matter. Like wealth just follows results, right? So whatever we do, however we want to pursue that, it'll follow our results there. And I think personally, the idea of wealthy is extremely important right now, because the idea of a millionaire, like, it's funny. I did a podcast that I'm posting next week with a guy who owns a business in Tahiti. And cool dude, met him down in Miami, and it was really interesting the way they do business over there. But one of the things that I think is really interesting is when they use the Peruvian franc. So everything's like in like millions of francs, right? So like when you look at the way that they talk about money, it's very different, because for us, $1 million, like we all remember being a kid, like I want to be a millionaire. There was Richie Rich. Does everybody remember Richie Rich? Right? Millionaire, right? It used to be a big thing, but like, right.
Regis.
Right? Yeah, that's right. And so you look at that and you're like, this was a massive thing to get to $1 million. Now we look at it, and the average house in Ontario is like 800,000. So the average property we're buying is almost $1 million property. It used to be this big palace, and now it's this, 1.5 story in some random area in Kapuskasing or something, so, it's a different way. And it's not that the houses have gotten really, really expensive. It's that our money is declining in value. Like, that's the thing that we have to think about. Like, one of those mindset breaks when we're looking at buying in real estate, houses aren't expensive. Just our money's not worth as much, right? Because if we have to look at it and we say, if we work in the world of lemons, right, man, like houses didn't do what lemons did. Right? So if we measured in the basis of lemons, actually houses actually went down in value. Do we understand that? Right? Because, lemons went up by 4, houses went up by half. There we go. It went down by a half. Houses are going down in value if you pay in lemons. Right? So that's the thing. So first thing that we talk about is make that decision, that we're going to go big. And then the next thing is we're going to start doing some of these steps here. So the biggest decision is to think like a millionaire and make sure it's not impossible. I'm telling you this, in my opinion, I believe that, welcome. How you doing, man? Oh, no, you're not late at all. We started a little bit early. So yeah. That a million is not a million anymore. A million is going to be the new middle class. And it's a hard thing to say that, but I think it's the truth, right? When we look at the cost of groceries being nearly $300 to $400 a week, we look at the cost of everything else that we're looking at buying in either construction or anything like that. The millionaire is the new person who is making $100,000. Does that make sense? Right? Because it used to be I want to get to 6 figures. Now it's I want to get to 7 figures. Then it's I want to get to 8 figures. And those jumps are huge jumps, right? So for us to get to that point to say that that's where net worth is, or that's where our yearly income is, or monthly income, whatever, we have to get past the barrier that million is a big number, because it's not. The other thing too is we have to think about, so does anybody have kids? Kids, put your hands up. So again, I'm going to give my wife a little bit of credit, not just because she's here. She's here. But I want to give her a lot of credit because, she keeps me accountable in a lot of different things. And one of the things that we talked about, even before I got involved in the Grant Cardone space, was the idea that we'd have a family meeting every week. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'll get onto that. And then, I sometimes have shiny object, syndrome. I'm like, oh, I'm going to go over here. I get busy, right? We all get busy. And then, she says, no, we are sitting down and doing this family meeting. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. And then Grant Cardone starts talking about, you need to have a family meeting every week. I'm like, hey, Emily, I think we should have a family meeting every week. And yeah, you can probably see how frustrated she would be on that one, which I would be too if I were her. But, at the end of the day, it's, do you want to be right or do you want to win? Well, she won. She got what she wanted, which is we have our family meeting. And one of the things that we do in our family meeting is talk about what everybody's supposed to do within the house and, jobs, chores around the house. And then we also talk about the business. What are our business goals for the week? So what is our revenue goals? How many new clients are we going to get? What are we going to do for mortgages in the week? What are we going to do for new clients for the 10X business model? We talk about all those things. And why are those important? Because then when the kids see that daddy is gone here up in Barrie and I'm gone for the evening, they know why. And the big why for them is that last year we rented a cottage in the Tiny Beaches area. Does anybody been to Palm Beach, Tiny Beaches area? Kawaja Beach? Does anybody know that? Yeah, the best beach in bar none, at least Ontario. And just beautiful. And we rented a cottage there for 2 weeks. And we just brought families, for 2 or 3 days at a time, who had never been to a cottage like that, who had never had time like that. They don't have the money to be able to afford it. And we said to them, I said, would you like to do that again? We're like, yeah. And we're like, would you like to go on another cruise and bring some families again on the cruise, and do that again? Yes. Would you like to go rent a place down in Florida and bring grandma and grandpa, bring, all the grandparents, bring the cousins? Yes. They don't have to worry about the money for it because we're going to pay for it. Yes. That's why we're doing this. Right? So if your big why starts to include other people, it can become even bigger and more powerful. Because there's so many times that you do things for other people that you wouldn't do for yourself. You'll work harder for somebody else than you'll work for yourself. Does everybody agree with that? Right? Like you work for your spouse more than you work for you. Right? So that's something that getting rich is not about you. The bigger your goals, the more people it's going to affect. Like there's a guy that I know for his big why was he's building a school in Africa. Like that's a pretty big why, right? Like that's amazing. Right. And he's doing it. He just bought tons of properties and those properties keep on paying. Money just keeps on going overseas to build that school. That's awesome. Right. So, once you start looking at that and you start looking at saying, how can I build for other people? Getting rich feels really, really good. Right. Because those other people are going to feel amazing. We already talked a little bit about this with the middle class. And, they say middle class is like being poor except with air conditioning. Right? It's an illusion that you have choice because, when you go on a bit holidays and you say like, hey, we're going to go on holidays, we're going to go to Disney, but maybe for one day, not for 2, or we're going to go and we're going to go and we're going to stay in the inside cabin of the ship, not the state's cabin with balcony, right? When we have to do an or rather than an and, that's when you start to feel the pressures of the middle class financially, right? Maybe we're going to take just the kids. We're not going to bring anybody else because we can't afford it, right? When we say those things, those are the limiting steps that happen when we have a middle class life, right? So anytime you have to compromise, that's when you're going to run into those roadblocks. And I'm telling you, the idea that this hopefully is starting to inspire within you the urgency of success, right? Like I love the saying, success is my duty and my obligation, right? Success is my duty and my obligation, because I don't want to make those choices. When we go on holidays, I want to say yes to everything, right? Like I just do. Like when we went out to Alberta and we're like, do you want to get a helicopter and go just tour the mountains? Sure, let's do it. Boom, right? It's amazing. I didn't realize they take off so soft. I never knew. Yeah. I always thought they're going to be loud and jumpy. Too many, yeah, well, that's right. Too much Vietnam movies. Yeah, exactly. We didn't get to shoot the Gatling. I think you have to go to Guatemala for that. You know, when you look at Grant Cardone, like the whole idea is like getting rich, it should be your battle cry. I agree with that. I think the idea that people say, I want to get wealthy and kind of like, right? Like that's not healthy, right? Wealthy is unhealthy, right? Because if your money's good, typically then your relationship's going to be good. Because if you have money problems, we all know that puts a lot of pressure on relationships, right? Right? It also puts pressure on our health. So, right? It totally does. So, you know, that's the thing. I think make it your battle cry. We talked a little bit about this already. You know, I'm going to skip over that. You know, the other thing that I want to talk a little bit about here, and this is some of the things that is going to be outside of the real estate conversation, but just the idea that you don't have to just work with what you have. You can start building other things, right? So I'll give you a great example. What we're doing today, really not for Guy, but what we're doing for today with this 10X component that we're talking about here is I'm going to show you how this relates to what we're talking about right here. So it's like, for example, if you want $1 million, you just need one person to write you a check for $1 million. Does anybody have somebody who can do that for you? Well, probably not. I mean, maybe you do. Like I have people who will write me a check for $1 million if
I know you.
there could be, exactly, right? And you know, so yeah, do I have people who write it? It comes with obligation. It's not just a free check, right? So that's number one. So the other way you can do it is get 2 people with 500,000, or you can break that all the way down, right? When we look at our salaries right now, everybody in this room is going to make $1 million. Do you understand that? Like if you make $50,000, you're going to make $1 million. It's just going to take you 20 years to get there, right? If you want it in 1 year, you just need to make it once, or you need to get other sources of income to start backpedaling. So for example, if you have a side hustle that gives you 50 grand, as well as your main hustle, which is your job, now you're at 100 grand. Now you've just taken your $1 million down to 10 years. So all you're going to try to do is net present value that forward with other lines of income. Like one thing we were talking about with Jason here, if you don't mind me bringing it up, when we were talking about Jason's business is he does helical piles. So helical piles basically, and hopefully I explain this right, these are screw piles. So they're basically like a screw that goes into the ground. Does everybody know what a sonotube is? Like when you put a deck in or something like that? These are replacements for that. So it instantly screws in the ground, comes with that engineer stamp, speeds up your construction, has the engineering stamp, you're done, you're in, you're out, right? Beautiful business. It's amazing. One of the things we talked about is one great way to help build this business is find a second product he can sell. Because he's got thousands of clients who love his product, who are engaged with him. All he needs to do is grab a second product and sell that to him. And he's doubled his business. Isn't that amazing? Right? Because he does a great job, right? So that right there is saying, I've got a business and I'm adding onto that business something that's complementary, right? So whatever you do, who else runs a business in the room? Business. What business are you in?
Branding.
In what, sorry?
Branding.
Branding? Oh, marketing, branding. Yeah, perfect. And which different elements do you do in marketing?
I'm really focusing on brand development, brand strategy.
Yeah.
A lot of logo design as well, but brand.
Nice. And do you have a couple different options that you offer people? Nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially developing the brand as a whole. So that includes the strategies component, but also all the collateral elements. So logo, website, any sort of material, brochures, things like that. We don't necessarily do like marketing.
Yeah.
That's a different piece in itself, but essentially.
Beautiful. That's awesome. Yeah, we were talking at the other event the other day, and it was, what you do, I think is pretty amazing. What about other people in the room? Business owners? Yep. Sorry, he had his hand. Ladies first. How about that? Investment and insurance. Beautiful. And right there, you have two things that you offer: investment and insurance. They go hand in hand, right? Which is beautiful, right? Other businesses? Yeah. Beautiful. Residential construction and renovation. There's a whole litany of things you can do with that, right? And you can get into things like property management. You can get into things like just, building your own properties. Like, what a beautiful spot to be in. Construction's awesome, right? I love it. So when we look at that and we say, how can we get up to here? You look at your clients and you say, well, if my average client is paying 10,000, you just need 100 people and you're at $1 million, right? That's it. 100 clients, $10,000 a client, you made $1 million this year, right? Now, you can 10x that and say, okay, well, I want to have $100,000 with 100 people, and then we can, start jumping up numbers. The thing is it's not the numbers that matter, it's that you're doing the calculation that matters. Does that make sense? Because your goal might not be $1 million. You might have already made $1 million. Like Jason, he does more than $1 million. So saying $1 million is like, ooh, I'm downgrading, right? So he wants to upscale, right? Which is extremely important. So his might say he wants to get to 3 million or 5 million or 10 million or whatever it is. He's got to know the numbers that get him there. So if you're looking at buying real estate, if you're looking at buying any sort of investment, if you're looking at growing your business, you've got to know the numbers that are going to get you there, right? And then obviously you've got to increase. If you're not happy with the results that you're getting right now and you've got to increase it, you've got to do the math to figure that out. So for me, when I look at this in the 10X business, I want to talk a little bit. So I own a mortgage brokerage. I first started off in real estate. Then I started my mortgage brokerage. And then I have this 10X business. You're like, man, this guy's crazy. He's doing too many things. They all complement each other, right? The real estate, I work in my local area. Here with Guy, we work up in this area here, and he's an expert in this area for real estate. When we look at mortgages, I've got a team of 15 people. We work across the province. We talk with a lot of business owners. We love working in self-employed people. We talk with a lot of business owners about their strategy within their business. I eventually start consulting with their business because that's what I used to do before I got into this whole thing. And I'm like, well, why don't I just start doing it as a business? My wife said, Steve, you keep on going out and helping people with their business. You got to charge, you're not allowed to do it. I'm like, okay, fine. We'll start, running a business out of this. And then I was like, okay, I need a system. And that's how I found Grant Cardone in the 10X process. So they all complement each other. If you're going to grow a business, keep the business number one, unless it's like something you really hate, like if you're, a crab catcher in the seas of the Atlantic or something. Isn't that the worst job or something is what they say? The crab catcher, right? It sounds like pretty cool. I mean, it'd be freezing, but, it's kind of like a, the smelly seaweed. Yeah, it sometimes makes me hungry. I don't know. I love that smell of the ocean. It gets me hungry. And then, again, it also goes to, if you have too many different businesses that are not related, like I've talked to people that are like, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to go over here and do this. If they're not related, you can't maintain attention on all of those businesses, and money follows attention. If you're not looking at your business, you're not tracking where your money's coming from. If you're not judicious about managing it, it's going to go away. Like the idea that money can just sit, money gets bored. It's going to find somewhere it's going to go to. It's going to go to inflation. Right? It's going to disappear. If you just sock in the bank, it's going to go to inflation. If it's in your slush account, it's going to go to slush stuff, right? So, or it's going to go to that, I'm just going to dump it on a marketing project and hopefully something works out, right? So, we're going to talk a little bit about, is anybody looking at starting a business who hasn't started a business? Yeah, right there. Perfect. So, and it could be starting a business, or as we were talking about, buying a business, right? Because if you buy a business, you get a little bit of an accelerant at the beginning. And that can give you a lot of value, right? But I was talking with, some people as well who, anybody work for somebody? Right? Yeah. So if you're employed, when they look at people who are actually really wealthy, a lot of the really wealthy actually work for somebody. They don't own a business, right? The word to me is entrepreneurial. So if you work within a business, you can be entrepreneurial within the business, which would be considered entrepreneurial. You're an entrepreneur inside somebody else's business. One thing, we were talking about, I think I was talking with you about it as well, is, the idea that if you could, as the business owner, incentivize people within your business to take action and give them the opportunity for growth. Isn't that amazing? That's just like the same thing as a entrepreneur finding more clients and growing their business, except they're doing it in the comfort of having a salary plus a variable compensation, right? So if you're in a business, you're saying, hey, look, I want to do more things. Talk to the business owner and say, like, how can I get tied more deep into the strategy of your growth so that I can, we can grow together even deeper, right? As a business owner, who would love to hear that from their employees, right? Like every day, all day, right? That they want to dial into that. So it doesn't have to be self-employed in order to push that. You just have to be able to have that connection with the employer. I was at a conference actually with a college, and all these people would come up to the table, like, could I get a job? And they'd give me a resume. I'm like, ooh, like, it's like you're going to try to throw in the cancer on the table like it's on fire or something. It's crazy. I'm like, no, that's not how you do it. Like, go up and ask me. Say, first of all, I researched your business. Second of all, here's what I found out of your business. Why are you here at this show? What are you looking to solve? And if I could solve those things, what would that be worth to you? Like, isn't that a better job? Like sitting at a job booth and saying, I want a job, right? Here's my resume, right? So think about that when it comes time to doing a review with your employer. Like, hey, this is what I've done. That's great. It's already been done. Let's talk about what we're doing going forward, right? Yeah, and then you are your business. You don't start a business. I think we kind of covered that. This is the where he gets a little gregarious, right? Where he says, "Who got my money?" Right? That's a statement he loves throwing out there. Who got my money? So he kind of says this and jumps around and gets all aggressive, and people go like, the Canadians in the room obviously are going like, right? But the idea of that is it's not like he's not focusing on the money. He's focusing on the who, the word who, right? So when you're looking for investors, who's going to be my investor? And that who might be, maybe they got a lot of money. I just don't want the who. Because we all know it's like to part, well, not all of us maybe, but if you've ever had a bad business partner, has anybody ever had a bad business partner? Yeah, it hurts, right? Especially if they have lots of money, it can be very painful, right? And so, you got to ask who's got my money. If you own a business, what's the avatar of your client look like? What's the perfect avatar look like? As a realtor, what's the perfect avatar for your client? Do you like working with first-time home buyers? Right? Is that the jam? Because if it is, that's what you're going to push heavy with, right? If you like working with investors and you don't talk any of the investor language, like I had this agent join our business a long time ago, and she's like, I want to work with investors. Have you ever bought an investment property? No. Well, what investor is going to take advice from somebody who's never bought an investment property? Right? It's hard. Right? Now, if you tie your brand to somebody else who's doing a lot of that, you can ride on the shoulders of giants and use that as your lever. But if you're not prepared to do that, you say, I'm all brand and I'm everything. And, oh, look at me, I'm the person to look at. Well, if you haven't done anything, you're the charlatan. And people will know that right away, right? So who's got my money? I think it's really important to know. Boom. I think like the idea of this event today, who's getting evaluated today, by the way? Are you guys, am I touching some nerves at all? Yeah, sort of, maybe. Maybe some thumbs up online if we're hitting some nerves. No, maybe? All right. And then the other idea is that once you start getting money is stay broke. This is the hard one, right? Because if you want to buy an investment property and if you made $100,000 in a month and you spend $110,000, well, that investment property is not going to come your way, right? So if you always have to operate on the income you used to make, not on the income you're going to make, right? Because the biggest thing that I see people do is they start inertia in their business and they start making a lot of money and they overspend, right? And, like the Olive Garden, you guys remember the Olive Garden, right? Yeah, so the Olive Garden grew so fast, their salads were good, right?
Salad and bread.
and the bread was amazing, but their business model
Yes.
killed them, right? They grew way too fast. They're very successful, but they were not liquid in cash, right? So they completely collapsed as a result of just not having the magic and the money, right? So you got to make sure you stay broke, right? Stay broke in the mindset too, not like saying like, I can't afford this when I go on holidays, because that's a budgeted event. But if you say, like, I'm not going to go out and buy that big flash car, because now I've got a little bit of money in the bank. You're going to say, no, I'm going to save that. I'm going to buy that big flash investment that's going to pay me in dividends. Now, if the big flash car, like I bought a Tesla and I didn't buy it because it's flash, although it is really fast. But I got a $55,000 tax write-off. So if you're looking to save money, buy a Tesla, because you get the write-off back and you get the HST back. So pretty cool. And I never had to a gas station, so I save time every day. So that's kind of nice. So it just, that side of thing, I'm like, it's worth it. Versus then when I had the BMW, and I'm like, but you know what though? To be honest, I bought a BMW and it was hilarious. It was a 2015, and this was like 2020 or something. I bought it, and I bought it for like, I think like 20 grand or something like that. I got a really good deal on it. And I drive up to somebody's house as this real estate agent at the time, and I drive to somebody's house and they're like, oh, he's really successful. And because I'm their mortgage broker, I'd be looking at their mortgage and I'd be looking at their debts, and they drive a pickup truck, and their pickup truck is $80,000. I'm like, so that's a good investment, right? So it doesn't have to be terrible, but just something that's economic, right? So again, an idea: hard work times time plus discipline equals success, right? So I want to start to dial into the invest side of things, so we can start talking about investment, guys. Does anybody have any questions about this?
Or just about the beginning that I missed started.
Yeah.
Did you touch on the why?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
If we can do a pause before this section and get people to get granular with a notebook and write a few things down.
I think that's perfect. I think that's a great idea. I think, if we take down it, like a lot of times what will happen is you can listen in a session and then you walk away and you take that workbook or whatever it is and you throw it in the trash, or you put it up on the shelf and it collects all the dust and then it goes into the box and then you move it to the next 16 houses, right? That's typical for any of these things. So I agree with you. If we could take a moment and go into your book, I don't care what page you pick. I don't care if you write on the back or anything like that, but start writing down your goals, right? Write down your big why. Can we do that right now? When we think about our big why, and at home, guys, everybody at home, I want you to write down what your big why is. Like, put it on a piece of paper. And this is something that allows you to kind of, like, if you vocalize something, it's like whatever you think is what you say. What you say is what you do, and what you do becomes your world, right? And so that's what we really want to do, is we want to take it out of our brain and get to step number 2, right? By vocalizing it through our pen. If we want to vocalize it vocally, say it out loud, what you guys want to hit, right? So we'll take a moment to do that.
I'm going to talk.
Yeah, do it.
Okay, I'm going to talk. Hey, whoop, I'm unplug everything while I trip on this too. It's a problem with having plugs in the floor. Some of you know me, some of you don't. And if you're online, hi. This has always been the hardest thing I've ever had to do, is why? Why do you want to do more? Why would the person who's working at Tim Hortons, and like Steve said, there's nothing wrong with working at Tim Hortons, but why do they want the next thing? It's not, do they want the $1 million we're talking about? Do they want to earn $1 million annually? It's, what do they want with that? What does that represent? And it's different for everybody. And Dave here's a team leader at our brokerage. We talk about this in a lot of our different trainings, and it's inspiring, our clients. Why are you buying an investment property? Steve is maybe helping people with their finances on the mortgage side of things. Like, why do you need to consolidate, right? So I have some more free money, so that when I go to Costco, the $700 bill isn't like, just a second, I have to go get the mortgage from Steve first. It's, just freeing things up. But what is it 5 years from now? What is it a year from now? What is it 20 years from now? So I'll just share kind of a personal example. It's a volatile one in my brother's life right now. But like, they would have lost almost every penny they put into their home if I didn't have a different why 4 years previous, their rent to own contract. So as the tenant buyers, as that was coming to fruition and they were meant to take possession, they would have lost basically everything they had to their name because the seller was not going to be willing to extend while my brother and his spouse got their act together. I'd love to just say it and call it what it is. But, 4 years prior to that, I wanted to change my life. We had a kid. We can talk about kids. And I was the husband bringing home like $400 a week. That was like my max paycheck, plus a second job, plus a business I was trying that was doing nothing, but costing time. So I was working, 16 hours a week and bringing home max $650. So we had a kid, and my why became, this kid's expensive, and I don't want my wife to shoulder all of this forever. And I've talked to some friends who are in the room too about that a little bit, and so grew my business, right? To first replace her income and to provide a reasonable life for our family, and somewhere along the way, my brother got himself in this situation, and to be able to write a check to just fix the problem, like literally, not literally in an instant, but go to the bank, get a draft, mail it, courier it to New Brunswick, but to literally write a check and solve that problem not only meant the world for me, but my brother and his family, my goddaughter who now has a home, but for my mom who has a strained relationship with them and just can't give them money again anymore, to be able to say thank you for being your brother's keeper. When we talk about why, that's one of them. And I know just because of where they are mentally and where they are, they're always going to need me. I don't think that's going to change. And so, we're not just going to have one why, but if you've got one that makes you do this, that's why. This is why. That's a why. It has to be able to do that to you and inspire you and excite you. So that's just one that I should have shared in front of everyone. People online, like, who is this guy? You're listening. Anyway, so that's one of my whys. And if when you're writing, your pen starts shaking, then you're probably on the right track. Yeah, I gotta wait for the camera.
He's making us all feel verklempt on that one, man. Holy cow. It's funny. So I did the train the trainer. I think you were there, David, the first time I shared the story earlier, and I had the same reaction that you just had. It's hard, but the thing is, if you don't make it authentic when you're talking with people, people don't realize the impact that you can make to yourself, right? And then if you can share that with other people, like think about everybody here in this room 3 to 4 years from now saying, I did this, this, and this, and this. Here's the impact that I made, just like what he's made. That got me here. So that was amazing. The other thing I want you to do, and this is sort of a Keller/Grant hybrid model, is, has everybody written down their whys? Yeah. And does it include like a personal, professional, financial, all those elements in your whys? Do we have that? Yeah? Yeah, perfect. Now what I want you to do is to take that, put a line below it, and say, now I've hit that why. So in your mind, you've now hit it. What does your why look like next? You've hit that why. What does the next big why look like, right? This is the really important one now. So I want you to take that. This is where we're going to 10x the mindset of what we can really achieve to create that big, juicy, they call it a BHAG, like big, hairy ass goal, right? Audacious. We don't have any, you there. There you go. And I can't take it back because it's recorded. So this is really good. Big, hairy, audacious goal. Yes. And because then that's going to be something, if it's life-changing and you set your goal and say, this is the life-changing goal, it's going to feel even better that you're working towards that. And that's the kind of goal that you can share with people, right? Like, this is what I want to do. Like for us, like we want to help 1 million people We want to change a million people's lives through real estate and through their business. A million people. That's what we want to do. Now, some people like Grant would say, I'm going for $1 billion. So he'd say my goal is pretty small. But I think, for us, I think that's a great goal. At least that's a good starting point. Because I think a lot of times what we do when we go to hit a goal, it starts to move a little bit, right? And we're like, because now it's now achievable. Like the whole idea is that you never actually hit your goals. Does that make sense? Because you're always moving it forward. You're always propelling forward. You never
Change
want
my
to
goals, like, when I'm getting close, I'm like, all right, we gotta change it.
go to the next one.
Upgrade it.
Boom.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I'm still happy when I hit the original goal, but I got to sight on the next one. For
Exactly.
sure. Oh yeah.
Exactly.
Save the celebrations for later, right?
Now, I want to jump into, because I'm going to switch from this one, we're going to switch to the investor side. So can we get that one all loaded up here and go through it? So Guy's got some sheets on the table, and I want to kind of give a proviso about those sheets. They're not for sale. So we've got some properties that we're looking at, and Guy's going to share them. You can share them online as well. They're not for sale. There are properties that are already sold. And the reason why we wanted to look at properties that are already sold is because then it's not like we're trying to sell you real estate. It's more like helping you dissect a deal that's already happened because it already has a statement of value. Okay, I'll let you take over. Yep.
All right, just give me a second here. I'm going to switch screens. See if this is still logged in.
I might have goofed up your computer
Yeah, thanks for that.
then.
All right. Okay, let's pretend this is it. Okay, so if you're here in the room, you'll have in front of you, if you're not in the room, all you saw was my forehead. Large target. Okay, so there's, Matt, what's the top property that's there? Eccles. Okay, so 87 Eccles, which is what I have on the screen right now. So Eccles is a property that is a 6-unit home. It's an older home that has had a decent amount of upgrades and additions. And so if you're online, what you're seeing is a property analyzer. Okay, so this sheet here, and if I do that, let's see if I can expand it. No. Okay, hopefully you can see that okay. So one of the things that we look at with a property is, yeah, let's see if I can. Okay.
Go up to that 100%. So it says, don't go back.
Oh, then this game.
See where it says 100%? Up right below where it says file, edit, view.
I use a lot of other things on the screen here.
Yeah, just as part of the Google Sheet. File, edit, view, there's a version right there. Go down. Cross.
Oh, okay.
There.
Yeah. Got it.
Put that to,
Is that better online?
is that better for you guys? Beautiful. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. All right, cool. Okay, so when we look at a property, again, got all that big why behind us. Steve's talked about the business income, and we're basically, this is one of the ways we can invest, right? The whole goal, the last slide that you had up on the screen was to earn money, and then we have money. The goal is to have money to invest, right? And eventually that money is working for you, and we're hopefully creating passive income, and passive income or financial freedom for a lot of people, and for us in our family, what we talk about is being able to do the things that bring us joy and fulfillment with the people we want to do those things with whenever we want, right? And so you have to figure out what that is. That's the why. And then what's the income required? Okay. So this is an analyzer that I've used. There's many out there. Steve has some as well. This is one that I've used for a little while. What you do is you put either the listing price or the sale price. The one in front of you actually sold for 1,425. It had 6 units in it. And so I'll just kind of go through how I analyze this. So if I click on this cell, which you can't really see up here, for each unit, we have a rent roll. Okay, so this unit rents for this. We've got 1,600, a vacant unit, which was a 3-bedroom. Okay, that would likely be 2,000 a month. But again, that's a projected, estimated. So it's always nice to have actual numbers. But when you buy an investment property, it's also nice for a unit or two or all of them to be vacant, because then It's not rent that was 10 years ago and it's gone up by the CPI. It's current market value rent, which is generally consumer price index. And so the government sets exactly how much you're permitted to raise your rent every year. Rent control, depending on whether it's a brand new unit or not. I'm not going to get into all the nuances. Yeah. So in this one here, 6 units, I basically take those each plus each other multiplied by 12. So this is our annual rent here. Okay. So we're talking about the price, the potential income. You know, you could put in a vacancy allowance. We have relatively low vacancies here, but let's say we put in 2%, and then you see what pops up is, okay, I might have $1,900 that's not coming in that particular year. If you have laundry, you can put it in. I always just count it as a bonus because you also have laundry machines that require maintenance. And so, you know, or whatever, you know, maybe they decide to go to the laundromat because it's cheaper and they can do 10 loads at once, opposed to have to wait for the person upstairs to get the crap out of the dryer. So then we look at expenses. Okay, so what are the expenses? Okay, well, government wants their piece. So we got property taxes, insurance, and some of these say estimated. I didn't change all of them. I copied this from a different property, so I didn't change. It's not actually 2020 taxes. This one just sold, and so these are current taxes. The maintenance, this is an estimate. So what I do here is account for 5%. So one of the questions might be like, oh man, I don't ever want to have to deal with a toilet at midnight. You have investment properties, Steve?
Yeah.
You ever had a call at midnight for a toilet?
Oh, yeah.
Come on, you're supposed to say no.
No.
I never have.
Yes. Never.
Right. So I have an investment property down in Chatham, and we have a property manager now because I couldn't deal with it. No, honestly, it's because my wife would get stressed out and her quality of life would go down when I was like not pleasant to be around when tenants called me. So now tenants don't call me. And I treat my investment property almost like a mutual fund. You know, money goes in, there's a manager, and I get the dividends, right? So I don't deal with anything unless there's a major repair that needs to happen. But what this does is it kind of, it earmarks a portion of that income as a maintenance expense. You don't have to spend it every year, but on a sixplex, if you have to replace a roof, it's probably not $8,000 like my house might be. It might be 20 grand. And so if you put away 4 or 5 years, you've got a roof. Got a question? 5% of the gross rent. Great question. So what this does is it says, okay, what's the gross rent? Gross rent annually is basically 100 grand, just shy of 100 grand. 5% of that is basically 5 grand. So take your gross rent, an estimated, reasonably, reasonable amount to put aside would be 5%.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that a little bit. One of the things that we do for our properties as well, or for our clients from a mortgage perspective, is does anybody own a condo? Has anybody bought a condo before? Right? No condos, right? So condos, you pay condo fees, right? So a condo fee is a group of people putting money every month away so that if the roof goes, you have a group of people paying for it. Think of this like your monthly condo fee. So it's a group of people, you and you, putting money away to pay for if the roof goes. So just like a condo, what a condo does is they say every 3 to 5 years, they'll have an engineer come in and do what's called a reserve fund study. So the engineer will come and do an engineer's report saying, what does the roof look like? What does the boiler look like? What do the windows look like? That sort of thing. And if you do that, on your properties and say, here's what I think needs to be fixed, it's not just looking at a 5% number, it's a reality, right? Because this makes it comfortable. Like when my wife and I look at buying property, we're like, everything's trash. We just assume we're fixing everything. It makes it really easy when something goes wrong, it's already been budgeted, right? Does that make sense? Too many times I think people go in and they think like, really hope the furnace is gonna be okay.
So you're just saying put in worst case.
Well, you put in the right case scenario.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you always go worst case, you'll never buy real estate. Right?
Yeah.
It's just a fact. You've got to be in a situation that you're able to say there is going to be some risk, but what's the risk that's acceptable for you? For us, it was like, we don't care because we're ripping it all out anyways. right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, well, that's the exact thought process we had. We bought one, they were hoarders. It never would have hit them. They never would have been able to move and buy something without selling, and they never would have been able to sell because they never would have been able to get it ready to sell. And you used to do home staging, and my stage is in the house here as well. So we kind of solved their problem for them, which meant we got it at a bit of a discount. And we had some walkthroughs. My dad, Andy, had basically done the inspector course, but he's not an inspector. So he went in, poked his head in the attic, and it's like, the furnace is really old. And I'm like, okay. And if we find something, we knew we had a $10,000 budget. If there was something that we just really couldn't see after taking possession and it cost us 10 grand, we're like, okay, I can stomach that. And that was kind of what we thought. Now, what this is let's say we bought it, we spent the money, we renovated, we gutted, we did whatever we did. And now everything's basically brand new. Okay, so now this is my future planning. It's my emergency fund. It's the tenants flooded the basement and maybe insurance didn't cover it and I have to replace a furnace that just got ruined or something like that. Or it's, okay, in 10 years, I know I'll have to do a roof. Well, what if it's 8? This is basically budgeting, like you said, that condo fee for the future stuff. So where the 10K after closing is your initial cost expense or outlay, which this particular form actually addresses as well. So thank you for the question. So that's the 5% maintenance. It doesn't have to come out, but a prudent investor is going to earmark that. They're not going to spend that every month. They're going to set it aside in a fund, either for this, or a pool of properties. And then, like myself, that particular property is 5% maintenance fee management. So you have someone else who is screening for tenants, finding the tenants, taking those tenant phone calls. They're collecting rent from the tenants. They're providing you an invoice, and they're, obviously pulling their fee out. They're providing receipts for the tenants. They're dealing with everything regarding the tenants. Tenants have an issue with another tenant. They have an issue. Hey, I'm going to be late for rent. Like, they're not calling you. That's what the property management fee is for. Okay. Now 5% is probably the baseline. You won't find it less than 5%. Generally speaking, you're going to see between 5 and 10. If you're doing a student rental, it's going to be 10 for sure, maybe more. But 7, 8% is pretty reasonable. The higher number of units, it's kind of like one location for 6 units, so it's a little bit less management for them. Where you have a lot of turnover, perhaps is where they might end up with higher management fees. This particular property that we're analyzing there at 87 Eccles, there's some heat included, hydro included, common units, and they have the laundry as well. So that's included there as an expense, and water comes in. The only thing that's not in there that could be, and this is where you really want to look at, what are the numbers the sellers and their agents are providing? Because sometimes, most times, they present the numbers in a way that makes the investment look really profitable. So they assume that everyone's going to work as hard as Steve, and they'll take the management fee out, right? And they're not going to include any expenses like maintenance, because who knows what it might be, but they want the numbers and the cash flow to look as high as possible. So they're also not going to put things like snow removal. Well, in a sixplex, you're not going to expect the tenants to shovel the parking lot, right? So you might be 2,500 on something like that. So as an investor, when you're acquiring something, maybe it's your first investment, you're like, yeah, I don't mind being a landlord. I don't mind being the property manager. I don't mind taking these calls. I'm going to learn about the process. I'm going to do all of this. I'm going to take this fee out. However, one day you may want to sell this, and a professional investor who's acquiring another property for their portfolio is not managing it themselves, and they're going to look at the numbers this way, and so should you when you acquire it. Okay, so think of it when you're buying from the eyes of the future purchaser as well. And the bank, the bank, especially on a sixplex, they're going to look at these numbers, and then they'll probably add some other things, I'm sure. Okay, so if we go there, okay, well, what's the other major expense? And of course, I'll get Steve maybe to speak to this a little bit, but we've got mortgage details. Okay, now it's a sixplex. You could get away with less than 35%. However, let's use 35%. That's a down payment. This tells you how much that is on the purchase price. If we amortize that over 25 years at 5.8% monthly payments, this is the mortgage payment. Okay, and the mortgage, the income basically coming in every month is more than that. Okay, I'm going to skip over the cash to close. Those are your closing fees, lawyer costs, land transfer tax, those kinds of things. Oh, watch this. I'm not going to skip over it because I think this is, if you're buying investment property in Toronto, I'm just going to put yes, meaning yes, this property is in Toronto. Watch what it does to this 24 right here. So Toronto is the only municipality in Canada or Ontario, I'm not sure, we have Ontario land transfer tax and they have a Toronto one as well. It's both. So that's a nice thing about and title insurance really is dependent upon the value of the property. So it's probably, I'm not even going to guess because I'm not a lawyer and I don't do it. But it's not $20 and it's not $500. It's probably closer to $1,500 or something like that on that property. Okay, so based on that down payment, this purchase price, this has a cap rate. What's a cap rate? Okay, so it gives you the formula there. Net operating income, the NOI, divided by the total price equals your cap rate. Okay, so 4.76%. So you can play around with some of the numbers and say, well, I need a higher cap rate. Okay, well, how do we do that? We increase the net operating income or we reduce the purchase price. Those are basically the things we can do. Okay. Are those terms making sense? Net operating. So total income minus expenses, net operating income.
So one way to play the cap rate price is to, when you look at cap rate is basically saying if you're buying the property 100% with cash only, that's what your return on your investment is going to be. So if you bought it with just cash, there's your return. Okay. Now, as a guy who's a mortgage broker, I would probably suggest that's not the best strategy. Even with the higher interest that we're paying right now, it's still not the best strategy because we're just going to go a little bit further down and look at what the value of leverage is to give you a better purchase price, better return on your money. Does that make sense? But I always think that when you're looking at investment, you need to compare it to, what if I get a Fidelity mutual fund? What if I go invest in Bitcoin? What if I go invest in
someone else's business?
Or invest in a business. There you go. I mean, there's a lot of different things you can invest in, right? So if you can't compare apples to apples, that's where I think the cap rate comes in as a cash purchase. But I think moving on to the next one, I'll let you go for the next one.
Thanks. Okay. So some of the considerations are like, I'm putting money out, I'm pulling this from some savings, possibly I'm financing a home or a property that I already own. And I need a return on this. And part of it is, I need to fund the borrowing, right? I need to fund the borrowing, but I also would love some cash in my pocket. Okay. So this next line here, this says that this particular property, based on the purchase price, mortgage rates, the amount of down payment, every month, it's actually going to have negative. This is not 1900 negative monthly. It's annual. It annualizes it. So let's go up and change something real quick. Let's say I bought this for 1,385. A bit of a good deal negotiating here. I'm gonna cash flow $1 a month. I break even basically. That's a pretty good guess. So the goal is not to break even. We would love $50 a door per month, $100 a door per month. Mortgage rates have climbed, right? If we were buying this at 3%, I want to see what would happen if you bought this a year and a bit ago. What's the cash flow annually? 16 grand.
Price.
But put the price back up. Yeah, 1,425, right? still no problem. You know, 11, 12, $1,300 a month. So all those things considered, put them aside. We're going to use real numbers. Cash flow is one factor, right? We talk about buckets, talk about the different things that allow a real estate investment to put money in one of our buckets. And one of them is cash flow, right? So extra income in our pocket, in our bottom line. It's either going to a savings account for the next investment, it's going to supplement income, whatever that income is for, it's cash flow. So cash flow is one of them. And then we look at this passive appreciation, capital appreciation. So if you look at the real estate market and you average it over the last 50 years, any guesses as to what the residential real estate market has done on average as growth year over year on average? Or don't. I'm not smart enough. Yeah, if you normalize the inflation.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's what.
Yeah. 4. Yeah. So basically it's 5%, right? Residential homes in Barrie, last 50 years, have averaged 50%. We've had some years where it's 5%. Yeah. Why don't,
We got it on recording, so we got to get
it's on recording.
Yeah.
5% on average.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm flexible, but it's my foot always goes in my mouth anyway. So when we look at growth of 5%, I don't like to put 5% as I'm going to bank on this number, on this growth. I'm going to bank on this capital appreciation, and in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, I am hoping and expecting. I always like to be conservative. So if I put 3%, would you say it's a bit of a safer projection, right? If we said, yeah, real estate's probably going to go up on average. If I banked on 3%, probably be safe, at least to the pace of inflation, at least. So, okay, so when we look at in the first year, based on the purchase price, you know, the current investment, the passive, this property is going to appreciate and grow in value by 3%. So this other bucket is your passive appreciation. So this property will earn, it's kind of an arbitrary number until you actually sell it or refinance it. So until you sell it and get that money out or refinance it and get it out, it's just there. It's nothing but equity and you know, your net worth, right? It really just goes to your net worth until you realize it by pulling it out one way or the other. But that's $42,000. Okay. The other one, when we look at this total return first year, so this is I got to go back. Okay, principal payments. So you've also paid down the mortgage, principal pay down. Okay, so that's this one over here. That's the tenants are paying the mortgage. There's principal and there's interest. Interest goes directly to the bank. Profit. It's great. Thank you, because I wouldn't have bought this without you. And the other one goes to principal. Okay, so the principal is, you know, that borrowing line right up here. We borrowed $926,000, and in the first year, tenants are paying down 25% of that, or $25,000 of that. So that's another bucket, is that principal pay down, right? And then in the first year, we look at, okay, so principal pay down, this is K, right? That's your principal payments. Okay, M is your cash flow. This is again at the 3% interest at the original purchase price. So that would have to be changed with current interest rates. But we would add that, whatever that happens to be. And then N, that is our passive appreciation. That's the addition to the net worth or the value of the property. We add that. And then, oh, this is a forecasted appreciation. I'm not going to forecast anything. Let's just say it changes. Unless, let's say, Steve decided he was going to work hard and put a new kitchen in one of the units. Okay, we can call that forced appreciation, right? So we improve a unit, we take a single family home, turn it into 2 units. Now it's worth an extra 150. Okay, well, we can force it, right? And that could factor in there. Okay, so that We've got a couple contractors in the room as well. Like that's the kind of thing. I'll back up, use my example. I bought that Porter's house for $310. We did 1,100 square feet of flooring, trim, paint. We did an IKEA kitchen, and we did a full bathroom gut and some repair work, and we kind of unfinished a lot of the basement and moved part of the original kitchen into the laundry room, make a nice laundry room, which the tenants subletted. And thankfully they're not in there anymore. But we talked about horror stories. That should be a fun segment.
Yeah.
So that one, 310, we put about 15 to 20 tops into it. So 330 plus land transfer tax, 335 were in there for this property. And the average value of a home, a detached home in that community, the month after we purchased it was $460. And this was in an okay area, a detached bungalow with a little, old 60s, 70s kind of home with a detached garage, right? So it would have been roughly $425, $450. So when you talk about forced depreciation, that's what I mean. Okay. So that line could have something in it. In this case, we're just buying it turnkey. Okay.
The other forced appreciation on that, or some of like newer, does anybody who has rental properties, by the way? Who's got rental properties? 1, 2, yeah, rental properties. Who's got like single family rentals? Who's got duplexes, triplexes, sixplexes, 12plexes? So 6plexes, okay. So one of the things that we look at when you look at forced depreciation is, everybody heard the BRRRR strategy? Right? I just want to hit that one.
Yeah.
So the BRRRR strategy, I think, is a really important strategy to consider. If you're just getting into real estate, especially being a contractor, it's one of the best ways, I think, to be able to create wealth through the equity component or the forced depreciation. It's where you buy the property, you renovate the property, and we're going to put that in an asterisk in a moment, but you renovate the property, you rent out the property, then you refinance the property. And the last thing is, obviously, once you refinance, the big one is, don't go out and spend it, repeat, right? Go out and buy another property. That's what we did. Remember how we talked about how we're really far behind at the very beginning, 750,000 in the hole. That was something that really helped us get out of it really quickly, is we would buy a property. We would, our financing wasn't cheap. Like, that's the thing. A lot of times people look at interest and they focus on interest. And I find it hilarious that people do this. And like, so for example, if one of the properties we bought, we're just going to say was, I think, about $400,000, right? And it was a bungalow we bought, and we had to get really expensive money. So the money, our interest at that time was 10% interest, and we were paying on that money. We're like, oh my God, that's 10%. We're like, okay, well, why don't we just take the 10% and add it to the property? So we bought it for 400, and now it's 440,000. Would we have still bought that property for 440,000? Every day, all day, I would have bought that property for 440,000. So do I care about the 10% interest? No, I don't, because I know that I'm going to put 150 into it, and I know it's going to be worth 900 when we're done. Because we're also not only renovating the property, we're going to what's called the highest use approach, which was we're taking the property and we're duplexing it. By adding that extra unit, converting what's a basement space that really has no material value, we're now converting that to an economic value. So it has an annuity, has an income stream coming off of it, which thereby increases the value of the property. So we were able to take that. And so what? We bought it at 10%. I don't care. Some people go out and they get joint venture partners. They're splitting 50% of their profits. It's costing them hundreds of thousands of dollars. But they're like, but I got a 4% interest rate, right? Or even worse, they're the JV on it. Does anybody know JVs? I want to hit this nail real quick. Has anybody been stung by JVs in the room yet? Yeah, JVs are dangerous. Just be very careful when you go into JVs. They can be a very good thing if you have the right partnership, but it can be disastrous if you don't, right? What's that? So a joint venture, a lot of the times, joint venture people talk about, and online, do you guys know, do you want to look at the chat real quick?
Yeah.
Just, so joint ventures, I want to hit this really because it's dangerous. I've seen time and time again in the mortgage community where people come to us and say, help, I've got a JV problem. So joint ventures where somebody is the person who's the money side of the equation and somebody is the sweat equity side of the equation, the worker. So we see this a lot with contractors, where contractors are like, I know how to fix stuff, but I don't have any money. And so we say, hey, no problem. I'll buy the property. You do all the work, and then I'll put it in my name, and you'll have a joint venture agreement with me, and then we'll split the profits. Then it comes time to start getting bills paid, or it's time to start splitting profits, and the person whose name's on title says, bye-bye now. Bye-bye. We'll see you in court. Oh, you have no money to go to court. Oh, well, that sucks to be you, right? So you have to be very cautious. In court, my opinion is it's the golden rule. He who has the gold rules in court, right? So if you can last the longest, usually it comes down to what you're going to settle for, right? So just be very cautious if somebody says about joint ventures. I just wanted to kind of throw that out there as for people who are new into the investment community and that sort of thing. Not all joint ventures are bad. I have some very good friends, Sandy out of Hamilton. He's another realtor that I know out of Hamilton, does a great job with joint ventures. He owned, I think, 330 units is what he has. So he's done fairly well with his JVs. He just said he just did too many JVs, right? You can't be best buds with too many people. So he's scaling back on his JVs. He's going down 120 units, I think is what he said. So he's doing a little bit of a liquidation of some of the JVs because too many chiefs, not enough. I'm not going to finish that sentence, but it's, I guess, not appropriate.
Too many cooks in the kitchen.
Too many cooks in the kitchen. With that, I'm going to step off.
Okay. Oh, is that a chat? Oh, that's probably me over there. Okay, so JVs covered that, and total BRRRR, we covered that. So BRRRR, buy, renovate, rent, refinance, and then repeat. And you don't have to repeat right away, right? You might not have enough. You might not be able to get enough back out right away, but we're also saving, and then some of them accumulate as well. But as soon as you're able to get that money working for you again, I know some realtor friends, not even just realtor friends, but investors, they get their businesses to the point, and Jake in the back there, a contractor, a business partner, and they're growing a business, additions in those, second suites, all those kinds of things. And they get that type of business. And these other friends that I know, they basically are building a construction business, and they're managing that. It means they are just project managing, and they can handle 3 and 4 projects at a time. And when you talk about you refinance, and then now you've got enough, you can do another one. But sometimes you get enough out of one where you can do 2, right? And so they get to the point where they're starting to manage multiple projects, and they've got crews in each one. And this one's waiting for an engineer, this one's waiting for an architect, drawings, and this one's waiting for materials. Probably been the story of our life last couple of years. But anyway, so back to the spreadsheets. You have that one again, 87 equals. I thought I'd start with the big one, right? So the sixplex, it's not where most people are going to start. But to give you an idea of where the numbers could go, and there are definitely larger investments out there than sixplexes. And as the BRRRR method, as I mentioned, this particular property, if you're in the room, you've got a picture of it there. And maybe possibly, I can't seem to switch. I was going to check to see if I still had it online as well, a photo of it. But it's originally a detached home that somebody added a suite, and someone added an addition with another suite, right? This effectively, and probably over a number of years based on the area in town here, it's an older part of town, it was kind of the BRRRR method, probably over a few different owners. But and maybe they didn't refinance, it was sell to release the funds, but those are other options as well. So so the total return first year on this one happens to be 83. And so when you look at the money you put in, that is your total return divided by, and if we go up to G and A, what is G and A? I gotta find it. Down payment, right? So that's your cash in, and A is the initial cost. So did you put any money into the property initially? In this case, it was no, it's turnkey. So if I take this, your total return, year 1, divide that by the money I put in, the 16% rate of return. Not bad. Okay. I want to do something else, which I find is kind of fun. Pull up a 5-year forecast. Oh, it is working. So this is where it kind of gets fun. All these things on the screen in my way. So I'm using a 2% annual increase in rent. You know, some years it was 1.2. They froze it in 2020. This past year was 2 point something. But it, again, that's the cost, it's consumer price index. Government decides how much we're allowed to increase the rent. Let's just use, obviously, year 1, I'm not increasing anybody's rent. Year 2, and we'll just do an average of 2%. So that increases, of course, our net operating income because our expenses are likely fairly fixed. Our income is now going up, right? So our net operating income, as you can see here, starts climbing, okay? And you can see what this particular property looks like after 5 years, okay? Our cash payment, that's consistent, it doesn't change. The amount financed, that was consistent. The amount of payments, the mortgage payments are fixed, that didn't change. And then the repayment is how much is going towards principal every year. Well, as the total balance of the mortgage goes down, more and more goes towards principal. So every year, this line grows. And at the end of it, we look at, okay, well, what would this have done in 5 years? And it was 143,000 is paid down, right? That's a principal pay down. Okay, so the ones in green are the ones to really focus on. And so this is the cash flow after debt service. And again, this is at the 3%. So that needs to be changed. I could go back and do that. And then forced appreciation, this had 5 in there from before. And so you look at, okay, well, what's my capital gain, right? What's the value? So with that 5% growth, 393 on that particular property would have grown in value by that amount. And then we look at, you know, accumulating that over those 5 years, all of those numbers, how do they add up? And it's, you know, the first year, projected return, 22, and it goes up because the rent's going up and the principal pay down's accelerating. And so you look at just combining that, basically the total projected return on this particular property would be, you know, in the 600s. And these are huge numbers to talk about. So let's look at a different one. I think do you have Rose Street there as well? Good, because it's like, I should have started with this one because we didn't have time. Where are we for time? 8, okay. I won't spend as much time going into this one. Let's try to get this. Everybody see that okay? Better? Okay, so this particular one, again, this is a property that, remember I said I bought it in Chatham? This particular one is a copied slide. 10 Devon Road in Chatham was a original owner bungalow that I had a verbal agreement with, and then they decided to talk to a realtor. It ended up getting listed, and I gave them my original negotiated price and said, thank you, but no thank you, to whatever it ended up selling at. So sore spot, but that's when I did end up finding a better deal. So, which is the other property I talked about. Okay, so this is property in town, legal duplex. So it's been converted, it's been legalized, it's registered with the city, and you can still find those in and around that 700 range. If it's newer, bigger, depending on the rents you can get, you know, 2-car garage in a newer area, more modern, it's going to be closer to 8 or something, but let's use this one. Now with the duplex, you definitely, get out of the way, you definitely can do 20% down, okay? You know, 25-year amortization, you know, and then 5.8 interest rate is pretty attainable as well. Gross potential income. So this particular one had 1 unit, and that's $19.98 per month. And the other one is projected. It's a vacant unit, 2-bedroom, nice basement apartment in town. would fetch 1850. So that's the number they used. So annualize that. And then taxes are there, the insurance premiums. We projected that maintenance. We projected what the management fee would be. This particular one also had included utilities, so heat, hydro, water. We've got those. So income expenses, we have now our net operating income, which is here. And then we look at what's our cap rate. Okay, well, a little harder to cash flow, right? Because the total income is a little less. But let's play around with a couple numbers. Let's see if we can do, Steve, if we did 30 years, what would 6%? So the interest rate's going to be a little higher because we're stretching that mortgage out or payments out over 30 years, the amortization over 30 years instead, which makes our principal payments a little bit lower. That's going to affect the cash flow. There's probably not a lot you can do as far as rent on a duplex. You're not going to go from 1900 and say, well, we want 2500. It's just, you're not going to get it. What's that? Yeah. So again, what are some things? So the tenant in the basement, like, well, why, like, it's vacant. The new tenant coming in, why are we going to choose to pay their utilities just because the previous owner agreed to do that with the upper tenant? So what we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, lower unit, you have, let's say 40%, and I'm not going to do the math perfectly here. If you're a math genius, forgive me. So I'm just going to say, what's 40% of this? And we're going to say it's $700. Sorry, no, we're still paying for the upper. So we're going to just on the other side, so 900. Okay, instead of 1600.
I would say if you ever just said a word to the wall, pay your tenants to pay.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, for sure.
if you're paying your utilities, they're gonna leave the windows open. They're gonna set up a Bitcoin farm running on your power. Like, they're gonna do all those things because they don't care.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So then you faucet, they're not gonna tell you about. Just make sure you get your tenants to pay.
Absolutely.
And then, and we're all environmentally.
One of my favorite real estate stories. I had 3 really good friends. They partnered on 3 really great properties. One was a 4-bedroom, big detached house in Barrie. The funniest thing with that when we sold it for them was the inside of the door handle was just like crumpled. The tenants also had a full mastiff. They had a triplex up in Aurelia and a 4-plex. And on the 4-plex, when we went and toured it and met all the tenants and tried to figure out how we're going to present this to the world on MLS, I had 35 cats. And when we walk up to the building, the upper unit, she worked at a cat shelter. She had built platforms in the windows for the cats to rest on. And I'm not trying to scare you away from, but yes, get them to pay because then they'll respect how much. But yeah, they paid heat and hydro on that one. And it's like, how are you still cash flowing? Well, it's because the rents were reasonable enough and they had bought it at a reasonable purchase price. But they just were like dealing with these people. So, yeah.
Do you want to talk to the louder?
Yeah.
Yeah, I worked for a real estate wholesaler for 2 months. My job was to buy and sell properties using the method. I could never see the actual property. I saw the only way I saw properties was through the inspection reports, which they sent me all the reports to give price. The things that people say plants, you have people who have homeless closets, and you have to try and get the homeless out of the closet.
Yeah. I'll just share that online, just make sure they can hear as well. And add a tiny bit about real estate wholesalers. So Helen was talking about having worked for real estate wholesalers and seeing the inspection reports. Now, who sells to a real estate wholesaler? A real estate wholesaler, you get the letter in the mail. Hey, we buy houses cash. That's a real estate wholesaler. What they want is to buy something way below market value. And the people who tend to respond to those are people who are maybe losing their houses, they're desperate, they live in different deplorable scenarios. So those people who are buying, their wholesalers, doesn't matter what the condition is, because they're buying at a discount, they'll maybe fix it up, or they'll not even ever close on that. They'll resell it to someone who's willing to do some work and buy it basically at market value, not having to compete with other people.
So I
Yeah,
see
yeah.
that
So
really.
yeah,
I
yeah,
really
for sure.
walk in.
Yeah. So
Well, but the thing is with those scenarios, like a lot of the properties that we buy, those are the kind of houses that we're buying. Like we want to buy the house that is nasty. Like one of the ones that we bought, we had to tear the drywall off, and we had to like paint the studs with a Killex paint, because the guy smoked so much in this one room that the nicotine was running down the walls. When you took the painting off the wall, you knew exactly where the painting used to sit. And you couldn't get the smell out. So we actually had to tear the drywall out, tear the floors out. We had to remove the window, replace the window, because they all just smelled so bad of nicotine. That's a beautiful buy. It is, because it's so easy to fix. Drywall is dirt cheap. Paint is dirt cheap. A window's a few $100. And now you bought the house and nobody else would buy, because most people are like, back away slowly, right? So just, your money's moving there, you're not moving there, right? And all those problems can be fixed.
yeah, you just have to have a team, contractors, renovators, or time and some of the wherewithal to be able to do it yourself.
Yeah.
Kind of like you said, your money's going there to fix the problem, or you're physically going there. In our case, I lived in a camper for 2 months in my parents' farm while we renovated the house. It was great. It was an awesome time with my parents. My mom helped, my dad helped, and I learned a bunch about bulkheads in old kitchens, and when you take them down, the ceiling comes, the attic comes to join you. Yeah. So, okay. So in this scenario, we've just reduced some of the expenses by making the tenants pay the hydro. Let's change this whole scenario and say, you know what? These are both new tenants, right? And I'm buying a property where they have separate heat and hydro, or the leases are already written in such a way that the tenants are just paying hydro. Okay, so we've just reduced the expenses a lot, which is changing the net operating income. And so now we're looking at a better number. It's still not positive. However, what are we looking at here? What else can we change? Taxes can't change, insurance we can't change. 650. If you could find a duplex, and there are duplexes for 650. You know what? This is a turnkey property as well. It's a turnkey property. What's that? Yeah, so 750 changes. Yeah, so turnkey property was 715. What I was just going to look at was, if you bought a property and then put the money into it and renovated it and created the duplex, you're not going to buy it at 750. You buy that at 625, 650, and then you put the money in to renovate it. But let's say we do that, and okay, well, you talked about something before.
Yeah.
So the lemons question again, and it's not. Yeah. It's about more money down. Right?
Yeah, and I want to hit this one a little bit, because again, I want to go back to the income statement of making money. Is that you have to have the money to invest the money. And personally speaking, I think given where we are in the value of real estate, I don't know how much it's going to go down per se. Hopefully not too much, so the person owns lots of property. But I don't think it's going to go down. I think we just need to see more money in the game, which means our investment, we're not going to see the 26% return that we see based on a highly leveraged position. I always look at, like, when we buy property, we throttle up in our loan to value. In other words, how much we borrow. When we get to like steady state, we throttle down. And if you're running around a 50% loan to value, your cash on cash return is going to be lower. You might be sitting at like a 10% return, but you're also very, very risk protected when you're running at that kind of loan to value. When you start throttling up to say an 80% position on a property, then you're running at a higher risk perspective. Because if there's any change in valuations, you're like, oh my God, I got nothing in this property anymore. It makes it a little bit more difficult when you're looking at trying to shift money around or anything like that. It also makes your cash flows a lot more difficult. So like, you can be a negative cash flow in a property, but still doing well if it's increasing in value. That did it in Toronto forever. People would buy properties and they're negative cash flow, like $1,000, $2,000 a month. They don't care. because the property is going up by 20%. You know, so you're okay because your bucket of your capital appreciation is so strong. But in Canada, this is the first time I think we've seen, in 30 years or something like that, that we've seen like a major hit, or 40 years that we've seen a major hit to the value in real estate. We go south of the border, this is commonplace for them. Like real estate's a yo-yo. You know, I used to go, when I used to do business consulting down in the States back in the 90s, you know, I used to run into this guy who was a real estate investor. We'd be passing it at airports, you know, and we'd always have these conversations. It was so weird. I'd always see this guy. And he's like, oh, Boise's up. And you're like, okay, well, it's like, it's always up and down, right? And he's like, I'm going to Scottsdale. Scottsdale's on fire right now, you know? And so it'd just be, you know, up and down, different markets going like this. Where Canada, it's always just been doing this. And this is the first time we've ever seen a bump going down. So I think this has been like a reality check for us that real estate will go up, but we shouldn't always expect it's going to go up by 20%. And this is something that personally I've been saying to Toronto investors for a long period of time, is that you can't just bank on that 20% every year, right? You've got to look at your cash flow. My belief is that you should have slightly cash flow positive, just so it feels good. But if it's slightly cash flow negative and it's comfortable, that's not a bad thing too. As long as it's at the bottom number right here, is that you have that rate of return, your total rate of return, and it's coming from somewhere. Does that make sense, guys? Like if you put this mortgage as a 20-year like a 20-year mortgage or a 15-year mortgage, you're going to feel like your cash flow is going to be really low because your payments are really high, right? But that's just going to the land bank. You're paying yourself because you're paying off the mortgage faster. Does that make sense? So you have to look to see what's the most comfortable for you to make that situation work. I mean, we have certain mortgages. What we would do is there's no payments. Like that one where I was borrowing at 10%, there was no payments. We didn't pay anything. There was no monthly payments, right? It's called a capitalized payment. So basically you borrow, say 400,000, at the end of the term, you owe 440. Here you go, right? Cool. I didn't have to make any payments when we did the construction. It was awesome, right? Because I knew, like, I bought it such a great deal. I don't care about the interest. I care about that I just made a couple $100,000. Thank you, Mr. Business Partner. Like, to me, that's the best joint venture is what I call silent money, right? Like, some people use the word dumb money. I don't like that word. That's in the tech startup world. Dumb money, I don't like that. But it's just silent money. It's a silent business partner. Give them their pound of flesh. Let them make some money because they'll invest with you again. If you pay them well, they'll pay you back. You give it back the money, they'll give it back, right? So sometimes that's good. That's what we have a lot of private investors. That's all they do is they just put their money out into real estate through mortgages in those situations, right? Does that make sense?
Oh.
Yeah. So each deal has to be analyzed on the basis of the merit of those deals. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate that point as well, because just when you're standing there talking about cash flow and the hope and the goal with every property, if you can buy it right, it's a positive cash flow. It doesn't pull money out of your pocket every month. I started thinking about like RSPs, and, you know, our ESPs, and we've got, you know, some stuff. We talked about your wife earlier too. My wife feels very comfortable knowing that there's money in RSPs and going into our ESPs. And I'm like, could we just cash out the RESPs and put them in a piece of real estate? Because I've seen what that's done in comparison. But okay, say $250 a month, 300, 500, whatever people are investing. Mernez, you do that kind of work with that kind of client, right? So money goes into RSPs for the majority of the middle class, right? And is that positive cash flow in pocket money every month? No, it's something that comes out of our pocket every month, and hopefully we'll see it in retirement. And hopefully, you know, people realize some sort of return. So if you've got a great property, and we're talking about all the different buckets, one of them is capital appreciation, one of them is principal pay down, one of them is cash flow. If the other two, if cash flow is negative by a little bit, you don't want to be bleeding every month significantly. But if cash flow isn't the most important thing and you can handle it, and someone's able and willing and ready to put in, you know, $500, $1,000 into, you know, mutual funds or something a month, that's negative cash flow. It's just a different kind of investment. So like you said, you're paying into your capital bucket.
Yeah, and like if you have negative cash flow, but you're using it as a tax write-off, there's some value. You're going to pay interest on the mortgage, but you're not going to pay tax. I mean, that's a big deal.
Yeah. Oh, no, it's all good. Yeah,
Hey,
Drew,
do
yeah.
you have any questions before you leave? Yeah. 100%. Yeah. That's
Awesome. I'm glad you guys can make it.
I know. It's freaky how small the world is.
Yeah.
Very freaky.
This is pretty much like, this is a analyzer. You can play around with these. But
We're
that,
gonna roll into questions. And
yeah,
stuff now,
basically in the question. So if you have, I can share it with you.
Yeah, we share it.
Julie's a coworker at the office, another realtor. So this is not my spreadsheet, so I share it very selectively. I like to share it in presentations, and you'll have a PDF version, but the actual Excel working stuff is proprietary for our friends. So I got to find my own, create my own. Yeah, and well, there you go. Yeah, so some tools and things that you can use.
As the mortgage broker, we'll share.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Awesome, good. Yeah. So why don't I just stop share?
Yeah.
I think we've analyzed that to death, which is actually an important point to think about as well, is action at a certain point. When you get prepared enough, you have the cash ready for the down payment, you've spoken to the mortgage broker, you're all ready to go. You've educated yourself on types of properties. You got to figure out and define the property that works for you. Where's your appetite? For us, we were just getting started. Single family home was really very clean for us. It's one that I knew would always be in demand, especially in a community like Chatham, where the average price is $460, right? So that was easy. We knew if we had to, we could unload it, because we've been in situations in our life where we've had to unload things. And so we were starting our real estate investing career with our baggage and our past. And so that's where we started. And it's like, okay, what's the next one? Well, next one is, as soon as these tenants leave, we're putting in a duplex, right? We're forcing that value up. So once you define what you're looking for and financially you're ready, then it's a matter of looking for it. And when you find it, we've just analyzed a couple types of properties, and you can analyze and you can analyze and you can analyze. And we've had people in the past, real estate investors or aspiring real estate investors, and this was in like 2015 and 16, when they're analyzing properties, and the market's going up 10% a year, and the average price was started in 2014 in Barrie was $300,000. And it took them 5 years before they finally bought something when the average purchase price was $650,000. They were looking for perfect, right? And so if you're a very technical, very analytical person, sometimes you have to look at action as well. Analyze it. Does it make sense? Yes. And go for it. And you need to know that you've taken some steps to ensure that it's good. You've maybe bounced it off a couple of people, some experienced investors, those who already own properties. And it's like, well, what do you think of this one? Not necessarily the realtor. Would you buy this? Heck yeah, let's go. No, ask someone who, is also investing, so have, just like anything else, a 10X coach, but like have a real estate coach, someone who's in the business already, they're investing, they've seen some success. And many of those who have attained a certain level of success in anything are always willing to share. So there's groups like this, and we want to do more of this. Yeah. So let's talk.
Yeah, and that's where, like, one of the things to talk about today is number one, finding the money to make sure that you have and that you feel confident investing it. Like, you want to be able to take this as like park money. You don't need it for the next 5, 10 years, 15 years. Because if you're going to take that money, you're going to park it like, and you're kind of dancing on it, that's not a good situation, right? Because that means that if some little thing changes, you're in a pinch, and it's going to be a problem, right? Now, if you're flipping houses, that could be a different scenario, because that's a business. That's not investing. That's actually a business. People think when you're flipping houses, you're investing in real estate. You're not. You're transacting in real estate. So that's a very different business model. You can handle a little bit more risk in that as long as your timelines are good, because then you're buying and selling in the same real estate market as opposed to buying in one real estate market and selling in a different. Like, for example, if you bought it last year and you're trying to flip it and it took you 6 months, 8 months, and you're trying to sell it now, you're not going to be in a good situation if you're trying to flip, right? So flips are very speculative. It's not the way to look at real estate from an investment standpoint. It's to look at real estate from a transactional or a operating as a business perspective, right? When you're looking at buying real estate, you have to look at the asset class that you're buying and being comfortable with the asset class. Like what we're talking about when you're looking at duplexes, when you're looking at single families, when you look at buying a house with putting a garden suite or something in it, that kind of a thing. Those are an asset class that can be fairly liquid, that when you sell it, you can sell it to different types of buyers. You can sell it to somebody who's like multi-generational home, for example. Mom and dad live upstairs, kids live in the basement, or the opposite, whatever is that structure. Somebody's going to be able to buy that house with emotion because they're like, I want to live there. It's very different than if you buy the sixplex. When you buy the sixplex, Susie and John aren't going to go out and buy that and say, hey, we're going to live here, and grandma's going to live in one, and like that's a really big extended family to fill that place, right? The only person who's going to buy that is going to be somebody who's buying an asset. And are they going to want to pay top dollar for the property you're wanting to sell, right? Because if you're wanting to sell it, there's probably a reason you want to sell it, right? You're not selling it because it's mad bank for you at that moment. You're selling because there's some problem. So we always know when we're buying those properties, like, multifamily is a lot like onions, right? Every layer you peel off, it's going to make you cry a little bit more, right? You're like, oh, it's got asbestos. Oh, it's got, that's guy actually this fentanyl. Oh, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Each layer you pay, and you're laughing because you're probably, I saw this, right? That boiler, it had asbestos wrapped around the heat exchanger, right? So, there's all those issues that happen. And those are the things that when we look at when we get into the big institutional style purchases, you're competing with institutional buyers. And when you're selling in a situation that you've got to be, really at an elevated status to sell it. So there's a lot of burst strategy around that. I've got some really good friends in London who do an amazing job. They'll buy 30-unit apartment buildings, they'll convert them, they'll sell them at a higher rate. They do extremely well, but it's a very different style of risk. I think you have to get past the first humps. Grant Cardone, when he talks about it, he's like, skip all of that and go straight to buying multifamily. That's one perspective. I guess I have limited beliefs, and I'll admit that. I have limited beliefs. I just think that that's very risky, right? And it's only because I've seen the aftermath of people who've made those decisions and got themselves into really deep hot water, right? There's nothing wrong with a duplex. To me, to be honest, if you look at your average rents on a sixplex versus the average rents on a duplex on a per unit basis makes more money. The tenant class, when you look at the tenant class on most sixplexes or 12plexes, you're attracting a different style of tenant, whereas, we had a guy who worked for Google, making $300,000 a year, living in one of our duplexes, so it's a different, because they have a backyard, they've got the parking, they've got, they're living luxuriously. They're not living and I'm not saying that sixplexes can't be luxurious, but it's just a different asset class, right? So just depending on the type of tenant you want to talk to, if you're going to talk to the tenants, you have to be like, this is the kind of person I want to attract. So this is the kind of property I'm going to buy, right? Because if it's really sexy and it's really great property, it's a really great neighborhood, it's going to attract pretty cool people, right? And they're going to be people that you're going to call up and you're going to have great conversations with, right? But if it's in the ghetto and it's a really tough, like there was a lot of people who bought in Windsor during a while ago when Windsor was dirt cheap, and they're buying in really repressed neighborhoods and like cleaning up needles out of the backyard. Like that just does not sound like a
rat problem.
Oh, they had many other problems, and the rats were doing needles, and so they had a lot of issues. And if you're cool with that, that's fine. But if you buy that like the nastiest house in the nicest neighborhood, that's the dream, right? Like the one that we bought, it was a duplex. Like you drive down the street and the trees all kind of curl over the street like this. In the fall, it's just like this picturesque, beautiful spot. And so when you go to have tenants look at the property, they're like, man, this is amazing. It's awesome. Like that to me is, that is a great. And then when I look at the bank account, and see that it's rolling in because I can charge a premium for people to be there. Because if you can charge a premium for your tenants to live in the property and they could go down the street and get something cheaper, why are they going to pay more to live in your property? Do you think they're going to look after it better? Like, they're not going to pay more to beat up your property, right? Like, that seems like an exercise in stupidity. Like, just go live down the street, it's cheaper, right? If they're chasing cheap, go there. Sell the premium.
Yeah.
Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Like when we did ours, it was the whole top floor was brand new, everything, right?
Yep.
It was like a 17-foot kitchen, a brand new IKEA kitchen.
Beautiful.
Sides and you know, yeah, the response from people because of everything else that they were looking at was nowhere near that. And we didn't spend crazy money. It was aesthetically beautiful, but it was an IKEA kitchen.
Yep.
But
Now,
full basement, nice big backyard, and
kind of,
worked out.
we want to open it up a little bit to questions. So the first thing I want to do is look at action.
Just check on this.
Yeah, sorry, check on this out. And if you guys online want to put on speakers and chat that way too, you're more than welcome to put your mic on and talk. I don't know how we can. I think we can. Yeah, we can add to classes here. Is there a question?
No.
Yeah. And but yeah, so the we want to kind of open up to questions. And it can be about anything. It could be about business. You know, looking at growing a business. Any questions about the business side of things? It can be talking about financing, anything from the mortgage side of things. It can be talking about real estate, anything from the real estate side of things. It can be from the construction or permits or anything along that side, from that side of things. We've got experience also in the room, you know, from all those different perspectives. So what questions do we have, guys? What are we thinking? Yeah.
Experience with exclusive spaces, which where I lived in.
Yep.
And it's very seasonal. They're cottagey, you know, Airbnb type of thing, or just renting out places.
Yeah, that's actually a great question. And it's actually very pertinent to right now, especially being in Barrie. You know, I have some clients who bought property out in Tiny Beaches area, and all of Tiny has put a moratorium on Airbnb. So imagine if you bought property and you know you're used to that mad bank that came in from Airbnb, and now there's nothing. Right? You have to run on the lowdown. Now, some people who were renting out to friends and family and that sort of thing, they're able to keep that sort of friends and family volume going, you know, under the radar. But the people who were really relying on, you know, running a beautiful Airbnb with a, you know, super host status, doing a great property and really looking after it and that sort of thing, they've all lost their income, right? And it's gone, vaporized. Legislated away. They're allowed to rent. They're not. Yeah. Now, you know, it's funny. I thought a creative way around it. And again, you know, this is not what I would tell you to do. It just was in my head as I was driving. I was like, you know, what you should do is like not rent your property out, but what you should do is rent the access to your television out. So then they're not renting your property, they're renting your TV, but they just get free access. So
It's kind of like parking your Tesla where you're not renting out the spot.
That's
You're
right.
not paying for the electricity, you're renting the spot.
that's right, exactly. Well, that's how it was when they can. Yeah, exactly. So you know, I'm sure there's going to be a workaround that's going to come on that because it's a very prohibitive situation for a lot of people. You know, but I can also appreciate from the local community where the local community is like, there's nobody here who's going to go to school with my kids. Like I moved into a neighborhood. I was down in Sedona, and Sedona had a big issue with this because all the properties in Sedona, there's really nobody who actually lives in Sedona. Everything's Airbnb. So really, they just changed the zoning from a residential zoning to a commercial zoning because it's all short-term rentals, right? Like that's the biggest problem with short-term rentals is you really are operating a commerce inside a residential zoning. Because if it's under 30 days as a rental, that is short-term rental, and that's HST applicable. Then you have to look at the property, and you have to say, did you self-assess HST when you bought the property? Or are you going to assess the HST as yourself because you changed the use, right? So there's all these issues that happen that haven't really been crossed when people look at Airbnbs, and that's why I've always told people be very cautious as you get into that space because you can run into some hiccups. And usually it's around the government. I'm very sensitive to government hiccups. Given my past discussions with those folk, that I always like to try to keep it on the easy, which is just don't deal with them. Yeah.
If I'll just add to that as well. And you mentioned the Mad Bank. I'm just going to go in this way. The Airbnb has all the hype, and it has big cash flow. And it's almost like that. It just reminds me of the get rich quick mentality.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I know when I was thinking about investing and did invest in Costa Rica, back then, if I really, look back, I wanted to get rich quick, and it came back to bite me,
Yep.
And put us really low in the hole. I didn't share that. It's a story for another day. We talk about your why and motivating yourself to dig. But the types of investments we're talking about, so your long-term rentals, good quality units for good families, or individuals or couples or whatever it might be. But like real estate is a long-term play. Just steady as she goes over time. Some of the quick that you can get out of it is, a flip, right? Or the refinance piece where you pull it out quick and get it into another one. But really, real estate, if it's good enough to buy, it should be good enough to hold.
Well,
right?
and know your numbers, right? Like with Airbnb, like my wife did actually a business case on this where she said Airbnb isn't actually mad cash. It's actually, you'll lose money in Airbnb. And what she said is well, look at it this way: as a stager, we've got a stage in the room, and when you look at staging, is staging furniture cheap or is it expensive? Now, staging furniture that people use every day is extremely expensive, right? And so, and furniture is going to depreciate. And if you're having new people in there every week, it's going to get consumed a lot faster than if it's being used ever so often. Second of all, what's going to happen? Has styles changed at all in staging? Of course. How often does it change? Every couple of years. So every couple of years, now what you've had sitting in that place might be not on vogue anymore. The color palette, the style. So you might have to get rid of that furniture. And that furniture to stage to fill a place, I mean, you could be upwards of $50,000, $60,000, in just furniture alone. Now, if that rapidly depreciates and you say that's over 2 years, you take 50 grand over 2 years, that mad bank that you made on Airbnb is actually not bad bank at all. It's actually terrible money because of the furniture. Now, unless you can sell the furniture off at used furniture, get 50% back, but still, you're $25,000, right? That's $1,000 a month just in depreciation on your furniture. So you got to know your numbers, right?
No.
I'm saying, yeah. If. Yeah, 20. Yeah, so 20%. So 20%. So yeah, so you're probably running about $2 grand in depreciation on furniture. So you've got to put that in. You've got to know your numbers. Know your numbers. Know your numbers. Know where all the little leaks are that you need to plug to make sure that it makes sense. Yeah.
Do you think that look like cottages? I know obviously for Airbnb.
Yep. 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 Yeah. So short. Yeah. You mean for the government legislation? Yeah. Yeah. You're at the mercy of the municipality, right? Like so the question was looking at cottages like outside of Airbnb, if they're on Verbo or if they're on, any other website. So they just had, short-term rentals. Like a lot of cottages owners that I know, they're not on anything because they have the same people coming back every year. For 15 years, they've had that week booked for the last 15 years. But if legislation comes in and says you can't do that anymore, you can't do that anymore. Now, you could try, and I'm not suggesting breaking the law, I'm not. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, because like on Airbnb, it's well documented. It's, you know, easy for the CRA to grab it, and I can guarantee they're going to, right? And that's very easy to earmark everything like that, right? And that's where it comes to taxation is the one that I like. In the construction business, we went through in the like 2005 to 2007, there was a big push for CRA to jump on that space. Then they move on to the next space and they jump on that space to audit and do all this other stuff to see where they can hammer out these big lumps of cash to take back that, you know, Airbnb. I'm sure I'm looking at that as the government is thinking that's this big, you know, lump of money that they can suck back into the system because they've been spending quite a bit, right? I don't know if you noticed, right? So, you know, I think, you know, that we're going to see that. You know, all these people they're hiring for that space, what are they going to be collecting, right? So you just got to be cautious. Like, I mean, I look at it, I think avoiding the government where I can, that's really what I want to do. You know, having lakefront property, I'd rather just go rent it. I don't want to own it. We talked about buying lakefront property. I don't want to look after it. I'd rather just rent it. And if they can't rent it, I'll just go to Costa Rica or something and do there. Yeah. But it's a tough one. Like because I see a lot of people, like there's this one I was looking at where they rent the just the boathouse and they're getting like, I think it's like $15,000 a week or $18,000 a week for this boathouse. It's really nice boathouse. It's up in Lake Muskoka. It's Lake Joe, I think it is actually. And it's just absolutely stunning. But if they can't rent that out anymore and they were relying on that bad bank, right? You know, because when you're collecting 18,000 for like it's about 1,200 square feet. The furniture cost is pretty low, you know, in relationship to the rents, right? Again, knowing your numbers. Does that make sense? Yeah, like I've had friends who they buy the cottage property and they buy the really boring real estate, and the really boring real estate always wins, right? Because it just ticks away. Like your sixplex, as long as it's been purchased right, is probably pretty boring. Yeah, it's simple, right? You sit on it and just ticks away, and you don't have to think about it, right? Whereas the cottage, you have to think about, am I stylistically okay? Did that one person who, you know, was really, you know, couldn't put the code in, now it gives me a 4-star review, and now I lose my super host status and blah, blah, blah. Like, you know, like all this, like you're running a business. Like that's the difference again. Like, are you running a business or are you investing? Airbnb is just like flipping a house, it's running a business. Right? Whereas when you have a long-term tenants, are you running a business? Well, technically you are. But that actually brings up, does everybody own, who owns investment properties again? Put your hands up. And who owns it in holding companies? Okay. Holding companies, I think, are something to consider when you're looking at real estate, personally speaking, especially if you have good income. Because your income that comes off your property, unless you can write it off if you're running negative income against your personal income, then there's sometimes a good wash. But if you're in a holding company and you're making money in that business, it's sometimes really good just to park it in the holding company. Especially if you go to capital gains or anything like that, you're going to be in a good situation. Right? There's merits in both, right? You'll have an accountant, and this is where you have to really, when you're talking to your accountant, make sure your accountant knows real estate. Ask them how many properties they own. Because if your accountant doesn't own properties or doesn't work with real estate investors, you might need to consider a different accountant. Yeah, it's tough, right? Because, you know, even just how you structure your QuickBooks. Like I have a guy who I follow on Instagram that I eventually then downloaded his whole program on how, because I'm a nerd, and you know, on how to set up QuickBooks in a way that you can structure all your accounts properly within QuickBooks. It's beautiful. It makes QuickBooks report really slick. And my accountant was looking at this, and he's like, his eyes are all going squirrely. He's like, "What did you just do with your QuickBooks?" Like, well, you're the one who should have done this. Like, why am I doing this? You're the one who should have told me this is how it should be done. Does that make sense? So always make sure you're getting the people who are working that are elevating you. If the people around you know more than you, you're probably in a good situation, right? Does that make sense? Yeah. Other questions online? Is there questions online?
Yeah.
Awesome, guys. Well, guys, so action plans for here. So we'd like to host this again, and we'd like to bring in other knowledge centers as well. whether we bring in a paralegal who's going to talk about, what to do when things, because sometimes things go south, right? And there's some really good paralegals in Barrie that I'd love to bring in. We also want to talk a little bit about if people are interested in building their business. We want to kind of create a focus on that too. So if you're looking at growing your sales, growing your marketing, we have a whole bunch of content around that to really start talking about scaling your business. So that's something that I think is extremely important to add, as an element, if that's something that you're interested in. Because I know we have a sort of a diverse room here. So is there any thing that we haven't covered that you guys would want to have covered? This presentation?
Yeah,
Yes, the one earlier. I'll email the presentation that we had earlier. And then we'll send out the invites for the next one that we're going to be doing. And the other thing too is think about it this way, is it's always good to work with an army of people, right? So like the whole goal here is, and this is what we did pre-COVID. And I'd like to build this again is, we set up like limo tours where we all got on a bus and we went out and looked at investment properties. Would you guys find that fun?
Yeah.
Yeah.
absolutely.
That'd be pretty fun, right? And we go look at it off market and on market properties. There's nothing that says to a seller, like when a bus shows up and 15 people are touring the property, like that's, it's pretty fun. I think the most we had was 45. We had like one of those big, huge buses. And that was was that one in Windsor? I think that one was in Windsor. And so it's just a great way to go out and look at properties and do the scratch and sniff, because looking at properties this way is one thing, but looking at it in person is another. The other thing is the idea of getting together and really diving deep on the business side of things. So if you're really looking at trying to scale at the income, that's the next element that we want to do. And we want to create masterminds around that as well. And it's all part of the Grant Cardone community. So we have all the programs for increasing your sales, all the programs for increasing your marketing, and then we can start sending that stuff out for you guys as well too. Guys, thank you so much. This is our first one that we've done since pre-COVID. So can we say this was okay? Can we say we're good? I give you guys so much thanks for being here and listening to us share the stories that Guy and I have had, and I really look forward to learning from you guys. And guys online, I really hope that we gave you guys value as well. And we're trying to create that cohesive space of being able to make it accessible online as well as in person. Did we do a good job of doing that as well for you guys? Thank you. I really, really appreciate it. And guys, thank you so much. We're going to be checking out and we're going.
I was going to say, I want to say thanks to Steve for coming, making the drive up here to share your knowledge and your expertise with us as well. So thank you so much for being here. Also, if you're in the room, one of my favorite things is connecting people with others, professionally in businesses. So if you want to chat with contractors, we have a couple in the room. We have people with insurance experience and stagers and, people from law firms. And like, if you need, instead of sonotubes, right? Like there's lots of people in the room. So I love the networking piece and just, like you said, a cohesive group, right? So I think we all can learn something from each other. So take a few minutes, say hi. Most of you didn't grab any refreshments, but there's still coffee, water, and whatnot in the back, so help yourselves. And feel free to stay for a few minutes and chat and get to know someone new. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, everybody online.